My father won the real war. He killed Prince Rhaegar. He took the crown while you hid under Castle Rock.
The king is tired. See him to his chambers.
Fans of George R. R. Martin's world are no strangers to disappointment, whether it be a television series that became an international phenomenon only to turn into a nightmare in its latter years, or its successor series that showed great promise only to come apart like space garbage entering the atmosphere. Then, of course, there's the A Song of Ice and Fire novels, where readers have been in a 13-year purgatory waiting for the next book in the series.
Over and over and over again. Because that's what hell is all about, Robbie. Repetition.
When Game of Thrones ended, the backlash against Dan and Dave was unlike any other we've seen for a TV series. Of course, there have been worse shows, but what makes Game of Thrones unique is that it went from such great heights to incredible depths.
We're in a crypt. Nobody thought of that. He's bringing all the dead people back to life, and they put the women and children in a crypt with all the dead people. So, rah.
When House of the Dragon came along, those of us that gave this new series a chance really wanted to like it. It's not only because we enjoy Martin's world, but I know many too just wanted a decent series that would do things right and, through its success, put Benioff and Weiss to shame. And the story here was simple. The Dance of the Dragons from Fire and Blood doesn't have the same broad canvas of Game of Thrones with players spread out across Westeros and Essos. It's a Targaryen civil war. Simply put, it's like America's Civil War, but with dragons. You'd have to be particularly bad to mess this one up. In its first season, there were flaws. The time skips hurt some of the continuity of the narrative and provided shallow development of certain characters, most of which we didn't see on screen for very long. But it was still anchored by largely good writing and excellent acting. Key performances carried the show through some of its rough spots. Rhaenys dragon pit scene was a red flag about the potential danger of favoring spectacle over substance, but in its entirety, Season 1 was a success. And the point it left off at, the start of the Civil War, made people want to return to see more of the story. Despite House of the Dragon doing well, it still pales in comparison to Season 1 of Game of Thrones. The character development there was intricately done and gave us numerous likable people. And even the ones we didn't particularly care for were intriguing, and we could understand their motivations. While it was shocking to see Jaime push Bran from the tower in Season 1, we all understood that if he didn't, and the truth of his relationship with Cersei was known, this would have been a death sentence for them. What was masterful, though, about Game of Thrones' first season was that we learned the relationships between the various characters, and the key elements of the story were woven into it all seamlessly. The events that occurred all built toward not only the end of the season conflict, but foreshadowed what was to come further down the road. The balance here was perfect. And this is something that was largely maintained through its first 4 seasons. In contrast, following a good but imperfect first season, House of the Dragon lost its identity in Season 2. We were left at the cusp of war, but this proved to be a bait and switch, largely due to an annoying, sanctimonious, and unrealistic protagonist in Rhaenyra. Due to her desire to pursue peace when war was already upon them, we are led down a path where the writers injected preachy dialogue and a contrived plot where the women on both sides seek peace, whereas the men are just wanting to watch the realm burn.
The young men have taken the bit in their teeth. They wish to punish, to avenge. What she did is not her, but the men around her who seek bloodshed.
It's simplistic and eye-rolling and doesn't represent the intent of George's story, and I know. The blanket excuse given by those that defend Season 2 is that there are many places where Martin leaves out specific details since Fire and Blood is a history and not like the A Song of Ice and Fire POV perspective. But there are parameters. Absence from the pages of the book doesn't give the showrunners license to inject anything in there. I mean, Martin never said in those pages that aliens didn't arrive to shift the balance in Westeros. Now, there are areas where changes, or I should say, a different interpretation will work. An example of this was Aemon killing Lucerys over Storm's End. In Fire and Blood, we were led to believe that this was done on purpose, but in the television version, despite Aemon's culpability in having a battle veteran like Vhagar chase down his nephew on Arrax, it was an accident. He didn't intend to kill Lucerys. But there's a big difference in the changing of motivations of certain characters in moments like this, and just undercutting the entire premise of George's story, which is the blacks versus the greens in a civil war. Instead, it became a muddled mess of intersecting loyalties, largely constructed around gender and poor writing. House of the Dragon could have still survived most of this. It certainly would have been diminished after Daemon and Rhaenyra's painstakingly protracted and ludicrous character arcs, which were stretched out nonsensically across the entire season.
Out of the question.
What would you have me do? What would you have me do?
But as I mentioned in a previous video, there's no coming back from this moment, where Alicent gives up her entire family for some crush she had for Rhaenyra.
When he's gone, Helena as queen will be the crown's authority. If you come then to King's Landing, I will see to it that our guards throw down their arms. We will open the gates. We will shed no blood. You will enter as a conqueror.
This is when the show stopped being any semblance of a Dance of the Dragons and became more like the Dancing Queen. Now we have a story of the unrequited love of Rhaenyra and Alicent, where we even lose Daemon's taking of King's Landing because Alicent is just going to hand it over on a platter to the woman she secretly loved.
Come with me. My part is here, whether I will or no.
Benioff and Weiss, though, are no strangers to character assassination. We had Dany's sudden madness, and right as she was about to become victorious, no less. There was the dumbing down of intelligent characters like Varys, Littlefinger, and Tyrion. Tyrion's demise was particularly painful to watch.
We have a plan. It's still the right plan.
The right plan. Your strategy has lost us Dawn, the Iron Islands, and the Reach.
If I have underestimated our enemies...
Our enemies? Your family, you mean?
The list goes on. I've covered them in other videos. It's safe to say, though, if you wanted to have a good ending on Game of Thrones, you needed to die in the earlier seasons. Despite all of these considerable problems and Dan and Dave wrecking the ending of Game of Thrones, there's really no contest between Benioff and Weiss and Condal and Hess. Ryan and Sara had one good season. It should be noted that Miguel Sapochnik was part of that. He wasn't around for the season 2 disaster. The bottom line is that Benioff and Weiss gave us 4 excellent seasons, 2 mixed ones, and then the unraveling, which occurred in seasons 7 and 8. And I know, there are plenty of people that will call Dan and Dave untalented hacks, but you wouldn't have cared about the end of the story if they hadn't nailed it early on. You were invested in Game of Thrones because the writing was top-notch and the payoffs were delivered with impact. I mean, no one was waiting with anticipation to see how Z Nation ended. The difference between Benioff and Weiss and Condal and Hess is like, in baseball terms, an all-star versus a bench player. One can soar to the highest levels, and the other just doesn't have the talent to be on the field every day. They might be fine as teammates, but they're not leaders. Benioff and Weiss, when given good material and when they have the drive and inspiration, can excel. It's been a rough road for fans of Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. While we've enjoyed the books and the early seasons of Game of Thrones, for the former, we're likely to never see the ending, and for the latter, it failed to deliver. They provided us with joy before ultimate disappointment. In the end, it's better, though, than House of the Dragon, which is just a cheap imitation of both Martin's world and, yes, the one that Dan and Dave created as well. And while House of the Dragon is strike 3, many of us are still looking for another at-bat. We'll give The Night of the Seven Kingdoms, Aegon's Conquest, and the feature film a chance. Hopefully this time, one of them will finally and fully deliver.
And there is only one thing we say to death. Not today.
If you enjoyed this one, make sure to hit the like button. If you're interested in more on House of the Dragon and A Song of Ice and Fire, listen to Caraxes and subscribe. I want to thank everyone for watching, and I'll see you soon.